Hello to all. My name is Tatiana Kolovu. Welcome to LinkedIn Live and Stronger. Our session today is talking about communicating or thriving in high stakes communication situations. If you're coming in from a special place that you call home, or if you're traveling and you've jumped in on the show, please tell us in the notes so we know geographically where we stand. I always say good afternoon, good night, good evening because we have lots of learners coming in from all over the globe. As I said, you may be thinking about ways to overcome stress, or you may be wanting to prepare better for high stakes communication situations, anywhere where you need to shine and you need to show off strong. So, as you're coming in, thank you, Shelby, always behind the scenes supporting us. I couldn't do this alone. I wanted to bring in a dear friend, a colleague, an executive coach, and communicator, and former journalist, or recovering one, I would say, my friend and dear colleague, Dave Human. Dave, welcome to the show. Thanks for coming in. You're in Arizona, right?
I am. Hi, everyone. Good to see everyone, and thanks for inviting me to the party. It's always fun to hang out with my excitable Greek friend, Tatiana.
I'm the excitable Greek friend. We're like a bad joke. A Greek and a Brit walk into a bar. Dave is in much warmer than where I'm in Indiana, Arizona, and I hope you're enjoying the weather there. Dave, I was telling you before the show started about my dear friend or my client that I've become friends with because I see him go through a lot of the trials and tribulations of a high level executive has to deal with when it comes to being ready to communicate. And he was preparing for earlier this morning being in a studio with a camera crew and a media interview that he was nervous about and he had to prepare for. What are the types of things that's a high stakes communication situation, right? What are the kinds of things that you suggest for a media interview be kind of on the checklist for preparation?
Yeah. No, it's a good question because the media scares the absolute bejesus out of senior executives because they don't control it. When I was a reporter, I would ask every obnoxious question I could think of because I was looking for a story. That
Mhm.
story didn't necessarily comport to what the company wanted to talk about. So it's very much a back and forth. And I think what makes executives like your client so nervous when they prep for an interview is the unknown. Or what
Right.
if they ask me about earnings? Or what if I say something stupid? And I've been doing this 20 years. I know you've been doing it just as long.
Yeah.
Even somebody with 15 years experience who's been a CEO, been around the block, they are just as nervous for that media interview as an intern would be talking to an all hands. It's the
Right.
same level of anxiety. It never goes away, but the good news is you can control it by preparing meticulously, anticipating some of those questions, and having a very clear, unmistakable message to deliver to the media. It's a lot of crossover, frankly, between the headline that you would shoot for in a press interview and the major point you want an audience to take away from. They're closely
Right.
related, in my experience.
Right. I talk about our learners coming from all over the place, and here's Mohammed coming in from Pakistan. So thanks for joining us. Tell us where you're coming in from if you're joining us just now. We talk about the mental sort of preparation beforehand, and for my client, I said, can you walk into the studio early, or can you get a sense of what the surroundings are like? And can you think of where are you sitting? Is it a higher chair? Can your feet be on the ground? I'm talking about very small details that will help him think of, are you standing? Are you sitting? Is it a high top chair? Or is it one where your feet are on the ground? Because that had a lot to do. When we practiced the other day, we were on the video screen like you and I are. And he said, when my feet are on the ground, I can lean forward. I feel like I'm more conversational. So preparing mentally and preparing physically are two important things. I also talk about to people high stakes communication situations, really honing in on who your audience is. Dave, can you highlight how that ties into your headline or some of the examples that you give?
Yeah, absolutely. I call it the so what, who cares test. You're going to speak to a reporter, or you're going to speak to your team or the board or an investor potentially. What do they care about? What is the thing that they're going to walk away with embedded in their brain that you have said? Can you say something along the lines of, look, the most important thing I'm here to communicate is, or if you remember nothing else today, remember this.
Right.
Because people don't know all that you know. That's why you're pitching them. That's why they're investing in you potentially, or you have to update the team or the board. So I think carefully considering that so what, who cares test that every audience has during every interview or every presentation, when you can meet that, when you can get the attention of the person in the back of the room who's checking their phone and not really listening, can you make that person look up and go, wait, what? Wow.
Right.
When you have that kind of line, that goes right up top. Because the other thing that people tend to do is they ramble and then they finally get to the point on slide 7 and the whole room is asleep.
Right. Or the lunch catering comes in the back and they're completely, I wrote about that in the newsletter, completely distracted by that. Now you have to fight that. Before we get started and talk about how you can prepare for and react to some difficult situation, I wanted to show our learners today that Dave has written a book, Weekend Language. Tell us a little bit about that. And if you do #stronger, as we are talking today, you get to receive one of this in the mail. But how did the idea come about of Weekend Language, Dave? And what's the top, what's the headline?
Well, the bottom line there is that everybody's a good storyteller and a good communicator 2 days out of the week, right? On the weekends, what do? We get to the point. We tell a funny story. Oh, this funny thing happened at work. We don't use jargon or acronyms or PowerPoint slides. If we do use jargon or acronyms or PowerPoint slides on the weekends, you probably don't get invited to many parties or coffees or cocktails. The polar opposite is that weekday language, which is very flat, very boring. I heard somebody talk the other day about agentic AI. And she said it just like everyone knows what that is. I'm like, what are you talking about? Now, when she explained it, when she put that weekend language translation on the top, made perfect sense.
Right.
But we've got to use a conversational tone. And that's tough to do because it's risky. Everyone's using the jargon. So I want to use the jargon too, but no one understands it. And it just spirals downhill from there. So,
I think with AI, we're getting so deep into that again. What did she say? Agentic AI? Did she add a tagline, or did you say? What did you say? What did she? What was her line?
That was really it. She said it just like everyone knows what it means.
Yeah.
And what it means is that there are a series of tiny, almost like little agents, robots who can do a bunch of really cool stuff that really help. And she had a great example about curing blindness in Thailand. But the example was buried and we were using the jargon up top. And the weekend language approach is to flip that and tell the story right up front.
Right. If you can say, imagine you go to a village and you notice this and you're a researcher, right? You and I have trained researchers to do that. I have to say, a fellow Greek, Nikolos Limberis, is in London and he's saying miraculously rain-free. I thought I'd bring this up since these are your stomping grounds as you go. If you're all joining us, put #stronger and we get to send you one of Dave's books. Dave, on the mental preparation, the physical preparation, and sort of knowing your audience, isn't it nerve-wracking? A lot of times we all think, I know this stuff. I don't need to prepare. And the preparation is where this becomes easy to talk to. I was telling my client the other day, okay, he said, what should I do the night before? And I said, call your wife and talk through the 4 questions that we know we are giving the media. So I want you on the phone, walking around your house or your hotel room and speaking casually versus sitting down, looking at your notes. We've practiced it enough. You know the highlights. Are there any other non-memorization or stress-inducing preparation strategies you have for high-stakes communication situations?
Yeah. The big one, frankly, that we use all the time is to videotape yourself. Now, everyone has a phone. And
Right
if you
here.
imagine putting up the phone and recording just the opening minute or two of that pitch to the investors or the board presentation, and then you watch it, that is revealing. It is what one of my friends calls truth serum. Because
You're
when you see what the audience sees, that's the truth. Did you get to the point? Did you start with an imagined statement? Did you tell a story? Are you using jargon or weekend language? You know, now no one wants to do it because they're all freaked out at looking at themselves on video, but it is by far the best thing anyone can do when they're preparing for
right.
any sort of presentation or interview.
Right. I also like, you're driving, push and listen to yourself speaking. In a way, it's embedding the content, and turn on your microphone, your voice memos while you're walking your dog, and speak it out. Don't put yourself in front of a camera and say, okay, let's go, press. Part of the practicing and talking to a friend on the phone and sharing it, or walking your dog and speaking it, is also part of practice. It's all of those repetitions that are going to allow you to be conversational and pick up at any point. We'll talk in a little bit. What if you get interrupted? What if the fire alarm goes off? What if someone says a stupid question or a sticky one in the middle? You can just pick up anywhere you left off.
Yeah. Yeah. It seems obvious. It is obvious. There's no rocket science to preparing, but I think what happens is people get very uncomfortable at the thought of practicing out loud, but that's how the presentation is going to be delivered.
Right.
And what they do is they spend a lot of time writing the slides and they don't say it out loud. So that means even they don't know how it's going to come across, because
Sound.
all they've
Yes.
done
Yes.
is written it down and worked on the slides, and they've never said it out loud until the day of the pitch. And that's a recipe for
Right.
disaster.
Quite often I tell a lot of students and clients I'm working with, I don't want to see the slides. Just tell me the
Yeah.
story. What's the so what? And all of a sudden, without the slides, they can't go through the flow. And I will say, what do you start with? Tell me 2 or 3 chunks. What are the buckets you're going to talk about? And if they can decouple from the visuals and do that, they can be more relaxed in their delivery.
Yeah.
Dave and I, for all of you that are joining us, again, #stronger, and tell us where you're coming in from so we know a little bit about you. We wanted to start with a few of the scenarios that I covered in the Stronger newsletter in October. There were situations. I gave you the scenario, I gave you the training tip, and then I gave you a pro tip. And maybe if we want to put the link to Stronger, so if you didn't see it, you can follow it. The number one, I would say, stress inducing situation is when you work closely. You're an analyst, or you're working with a person, you're on their staff and you're preparing the deck, or maybe you are a junior person and you're looking for opportunities to hit the spotlight. And all of a sudden, the executive you work with says, I don't have time for this. Can you jump in front of the board? Probably not the board, but can you go in front of the meeting? Can you present this? And it's at 1:00. Is that okay? You've got an hour. You've been working on this. I call this being voluntold, first of all. And the situation of being voluntold is completely stress inducing. Dave, what happens? How do you train for that?
It is terrifying. Let's be clear. When your boss says, "Oh, by the way, you have to do that pitch because I can't make it,"
Yeah.
and it's in 45 minutes or an hour, good luck. Immediately your adrenaline goes through the roof and you're like, "Oh my God, what am I going to do?" The only thing you can do in that situation, you can't possibly memorize an entire presentation that's somebody else's presentation in 45 minutes or an hour. Think of it like you're just going to do the movie trailer. You're not going to do the whole movie. So if your boss says that, and you can say to them, "Okay, so what is the big message you want me to get across?" That's a perfectly legitimate question. Then you can at least say, if your boss's name is Jeff, you can say, "The big thing Jeff wanted me to communicate to you today is this."
Right.
So you've done the top line pitch. That and a big finish are probably the only 2 things you can really do in that, because typically in a presentation, a board pitch, whatever, it's not very long. It's not an hour. you probably have 5 minutes to update the team on something that's going on. And one of the things that Hollywood does pretty well, actually, is they pitch, causing a high concept pitch. That's what it's called. They take something that people know and they apply it to something else that they're pitching. So, for example, give you an example. This movie was pitched this exact way. 5 words. This movie is Die Hard on a bus. That's how it was pitched. Die Hard on a bus. And if you guessed the movie Speed, you're absolutely right.
Right.
You know, this isn't going to star Meryl Streep, and it's not going to win an Academy Award. This is a summer blockbuster, and we're going to have to spend about $150 million on special effects. We're going to blow some stuff up, and a hunky guy is going to save a beautiful woman from a psycho, only this time it's on a bus. Got it. From 5 words.
Right.
So you can go in and do the equivalent of that big hook. There was a really good example of this some years ago. They did a retrospective on Friends. Now, you know, depending on where you're dialing in from, Friends, the TV show, may be on your screen or not, and it's all on all streaming services, it seems. But what happened was David Crane, the executive producer of Friends, when he went to pitch the show, he pitched it very efficiently. In fact, we're going to watch a 7-second video of him pitching Friends. Let's take a look.
The one sentence pitch is, it's about that time in your life when your friends are your family.
That's it. What's Friends about? It's about that time in your life when your friends are your family. Let me tell you a little bit more about how the plot unfolds.
Right.
So if you can get that hook when you're voluntold, you're going to be in good shape.
Right. And also, as you said, you're representing Jeff couldn't be here today. Don't throw Jeff under the bus, obviously, or anyone else that doesn't show up. And to say, we've been working on this. Jeff would tell you this. So you are showing that you're the messenger, but you can also get the spotlight and win good points for not stressing out in the moment. I always tell people that if you've been working on the topic or you've been preparing the deck, the visuals, be thinking, what would I lean into or start with if I was presenting with? What would be my 5 words or 6 words? And now that you say that, I do this in workshops. I say, take your message down to a minute, or now take it down to 6 words. What would you open with? It's a great exercise to be able to do. Any other tips on the start and the finish, the bookends?
I think it's the organization. Your point is a good one. You have this slide deck. Let's say you have 10 slides. Out of those 10 slides, what is the big thing? If you said, if you remember nothing else today, remember this. What is the this? And it's probably in that deck somewhere. But I guess I'd say don't make them wait for it. Don't make them wait. Audiences' attention spans, they're like goldfish, 9-second attention span. Everyone's on their phone. They're very distracted, especially if you're dialed in remotely as we are. So how do you get and grab their attention? You got to dive right to it. And that's not intuitive for a lot of people. That takes a little bit of prep.
Right. So the next scenario that I wanted to lean on that I told or shared in the newsletter is similar to being voluntold. That is sort of present for me. But the scenario is, again, you've worked very hard. This is a presentation that's important. Someone doesn't do a good job with time management, and you end up with half the time, 10% of the time, or a minute, whatever it may be. And the agenda gets shaken up to the point where, again, now you're tested for being able to open, close, or cut. In many of I have a course on LinkedIn Learning called Presenting to Senior Executives, and it's in the age of AI because I point to many tools in AI that can prepare you for different steps that you have to take. When this is last minute, I tell people, don't let them see you sweat. Say, okay, I can prepare for this. In your mind, think, if I'm going to show a slide, which one is it? But we go back to opening and hitting with the strong opening. What training tips would you give to prepare for an agenda shakeup, Dave?
You know, I probably sound like a bit of a broken record, but let's say you do a practice run the day before, 2 days before, whenever, and you are brave enough to videotape yourself on your phone. as you watch it, which is excruciating, but do it anyway, as
Said
you
that,
watch it,
yes.
sometimes what happens is the really good story or the really pithy die hard on a bus type line comes 3 minutes into the presentation.
Right.
And to your point about senior executives have the worst attention spans because they're so busy. And if you wait until 7 minutes into the presentation, it can be game over. So in some ways, if you think of it like verbal Lego blocks, you're just rearranging the Lego blocks so you say that really good thing right up front. And then if the agenda is shaken up, out of your control, your speaker number 5 and speakers 1 through 4 all go long. So you have 5 minutes instead of 10 minutes. You still can get that major message across because you architected, you organized, you calibrated the presentation
Right.
to hit them right up front. Very similar to the voluntold, but this time, it's a different stress because suddenly you can see the clock and you think, oh my gosh,
Right.
everyone's going long. What am I going to do? Well, you can still get it across if you hit that big message right up front.
I think it's a blessing that the agenda shakeup happens if you are in the back of the room and you see it, because you can be planning strategically. Another benefit of being in the back of the room allows you to piggyback on things that people have said. As we've heard earlier, we hear that this is critical. So be mindful to have your ears open to be connecting, because that shows that you're paying attention. If you're sitting outside of the room waiting to enter and you see that the clock is ticking, you still have time to prepare. So I think this is a different situation than being voluntold, where you've had all the time to prepare. Now you have to put the Lego blocks in place. Again, practice, as Dave said, to continue to think, if I only had a minute, what's the bottom line? And you can start by saying, I'm understanding we don't have much time. If there's one thing I need you to remember for today, boom, start with that. We have a good example from a show, right? That gets to that versus having some intro. Take us on the setup, Dave.
One of the things that people struggle with, especially left brain analytical people, architects, engineers, scientists, researchers, doctors, is they like to have a logical flow. They like to show their work. And what happens is they come here, they're like, okay, this is what happened. And then we did this and this and this and this. And eventually they get to the point over here and no one's paying attention. And there's a movie called 50-50, which is about a young guy, Joseph Gordon-Levitt, who gets diagnosed with cancer. And there's one scene where his family is sitting in the waiting room at the hospital and they're waiting for the surgery to conclude. And then the doctor comes out and tells them what happened. And she does it exactly backwards. And one of the characters, played by Seth Rogen, corrects her at the very end. Here, let's take a look. You'll see what I mean.
What a line, right? He tells the doctor off, start with that information, because we call it the process of discovery. In many places, people feel like they have to. I'm not talking about physicians. This is I can see the logic behind this, but if you go into a presentation, you want to say, we did this kind of research, we looked at this specifically, and then again, here's our recommendation. The audience is, they're filling up their Instacart and shopping for their groceries on the weekend.
Yeah, no, it's very true. But it's the way people like doctors and scientists and researchers are trained. That's how they're trained. And it's very different when you get to be a VP at an engineering company or a computer science company.
Yeah.
And then you have to present and you have to flip your entire approach to get the point across. And it's really difficult to do. It takes a lot of work. And that one of the paradoxes of doing this well, and having done it for 20 years with clients, we see this all the time, is when you do that flip, it takes a lot of practice, and if it looks easy, it's the result of a ton of work.
Yeah.
But people tend to think, oh, she's just a good speaker or he's just a good speaker. There's no such thing. There are people who practice and think about it, and then there are people who try and wing it, which just doesn't work.
Oh, gosh, yes. And again, it doesn't mean that they don't share what it is that is important. They just flip it. Coming in Senegal. Wonderful. Thanks for joining us. By the way, if you're with us today, we're talking about communicating in high stakes situations. when things go wrong, when you get cut on time, when you get a change of hello, Nazifa, joining us from Dubai, when you are told that you have to do something that you're not prepared for. We'll talk about virtual settings in just a little bit because they create a whole bunch of other challenges and stressors. But please jump in with any questions you might have for us and what we recommend that you do to train for them or to react on the spot. We're going to transition to the also lovely environment of a virtual situation like we are now, and setting up the virtual fails or recovering from them. And as Dave prepares to make his comments, I would say that in the newsletter, I said, do not assume anything is going to work. If right now we were together and my video cut out, have I prepared Dave to say, you're going to be on your own for a while until I come back? Or do I have my phone that I can message Shelby, who is producing the show behind the scenes? Do we have a way to communicate? But quite often, everyone is in their home offices. They're presenting. They can't share the slides, or the sound doesn't work, or someone doesn't have the handouts. What do you recommend for beyond mental preparation, practicing, knowing your audience? Is there anything special about the virtual setting that we add on the list, Dave?
Yeah, there's a ton of things. I mean, it's almost become a meme, hasn't it? Where somebody starts talking and they're like, "Oh, you're muted." You know, it's so crazy. But when you think about it, virtually, you are everything. You are the talent. You are the sound engineer. You are the lighting director. You are everything. And it's very stressful. And if you think about today, right, what did we do? You and me and Shelby were here 30 minutes early. And what did we do? We tested everything. Mm-hmm. Now, no one saw that. But then when we went live, suddenly it's like, oh, hey, everyone. And it's as cool as a cucumber just going in. But it's the result of a ton of prep. And there are so many things that can trip you up when it comes to virtual presentations. There are distractions. You know, maybe you're doing the classic looking at your notes instead of looking at the camera. So you end up presenting, or your camera is way down here, so we're all looking up your nose when you speak. That still happens. Even 5 years after COVID started, it still happens. It's insane. People are backlit and they look like they're in the witness protection program because you can't even see their faces because the lighting is behind them instead of in front of them. Oh, the one thing that's hilarious to me, and there's a great example of this that we'll play here, is the filters. Now you can do all these filters with you know, where you show up looking like a cat or a bunny or something. And what happened during COVID, when it first started, you know, back in 2021, when we were all furiously logging onto Zoom and trying to figure out how it all worked, in Texas, they were having court hearings remotely, like literally hearings that you would have in a court of law, but the judge with counsel dialed in remotely. And there's an attorney called Rod Ponton, and you may not know that name, but you may have seen the video that we're about to play, because he showed up in a court hearing, a live court hearing, and what he didn't realize is that his assistant had a young daughter who had been playing with the filters. Now, this video is 32 seconds long.
It's viral. It's viral.
All-time favorites. You'll notice two things about it. Number one, at 4 seconds, Rod Ponton's eyes flare and look off to the side because he realizes he's showing up like a cat. And then at 30 seconds in, he says a thing that will probably be on his gravestone: "I'm not a cat." And it's just wonderful. Let's take a look.
Mr. Ponton, I believe you have a filter turned on in the video settings. You might want to
we're trying to, can you hear me, Judge?
I can hear you. I think it's a filter.
It is, and I don't know how to remove it. I've got my assistant here. She's trying to, but I'm prepared to go forward with it. I'm here live. I'm not a cat.
Wait, I'm prepared to go forward with it. Like, let's shut the video. Let's have your voice and not your image. And how could you even keep a straight look and straight eye when you're judicial court and he's looking around and nodding as the cat?
No, it's one of my all-time favorites. And
All-time.
basically what it illustrates is that if there is a visual distraction, if the kids or the cat are behind you, if you got a piece of spinach stuck in your teeth, if you're looking off to the side, people can't listen. They get very distracted very quickly. So in addition to organizing your narrative, getting to the point, you've got to manage the visuals on a virtual thing, because otherwise people just aren't going to hear what you're saying. And that's really the bottom line.
Right. And you and I coach our clients quite often. I just had that conversation. I had someone who was the ratio between their head and their body and the top of their head was off. So he was doing, I could see he was gesturing, but you couldn't see his gestures, or you couldn't really, he was looking further down because the camera was not at the right angle. That's such an easy, small fix that is it makes a big difference. And again, preparing and taking time to do that. Jules is asking us a question that's taking us a little away from virtual, but I want to address it. He says, how do you communicate with impact in settings with a very diverse set of stakeholders? Some strategically oriented, others have great attention to detail. We talk a lot about the varied audience. I have some thoughts. Do you want me to share first if you want to think about it, Dave?
No, go ahead. Yeah, I'm interested to hear.
Well, you're talking about, Jules, sometimes I coach our students and our clients to, if you know your audience and if you know that their knowledge levels or their potential anticipation of responding to what you will say are varied, I would address that. And today I could start without knowing the knowledge level that you all have on this. I could say some of you have done so many presentations and you know what it takes to deal with high stakes situations. We'll cover a few maybe you haven't thought about, but for some of you, some of this is new. And we want to make sure we also give tips if you're getting started. So right in the beginning, I recognize that I understand the knowledge or familiarity with the topic. If you visibly, Jules, see the person that's written the book in the room, I would say we have an expert in the room, because I could really throw you off as a speaker, but they come there to be supportive. You can say we have an expert in the room, and I would love it if you have some commentary or anything to add. Show that you're inviting the person in versus you are speaking as if they're not present, because everyone else in the room can see that as well. Dave, do you have anything else to share?
Yeah, I think I see this all the time, Jules. It's a good question because there's a mixed audience. Some people are marketing and sales. Some people are business development, engineers, executives. And how do you calibrate the message so that it gets all of them? And I think the big thing I would say is don't assume anything. I coached an engineer years ago at a tech company in Silicon Valley, and he threw out the acronym MECE, M-E-C-E. And he just said it very casually. And when we watched the video, because I was recording him, I paused it and I said, are you sure that everybody in the room, even the salespeople, will know what MECE means? M-E-C-E. It stands apparently for mutually exhausted, comprehensively exhausted. I don't even remember, frankly. But the problem was he was very familiar with it because he was an engineer. So he figured, oh, well, everyone knows what that means. They don't. They don't. So you've got to basically assume nothing and go for the junior person in the room who's been at the company 2 weeks. If you get that person, you get everybody else. And that it pivots back, frankly, to speaking in very clear conversational terms, because that gets everyone. And then you can get deep afterwards.
Right. So again, what's in it for them? Or I always say, sometimes you have audiences that have a clear agenda coming into the room and others that are pretty apathetic. And one group can influence the other. So you can say today, as we talk about this, you may be thinking blah, 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 blah. If you know people in the room, or you may have these questions that we will answer. But if you remember one thing, it should be this, and you open with that statement and you proceed by communicating that as well. Anything to add back to Jafar is sharing with us? I'm in the theater. He's in the theater listening, and he's telling us, I think communication, empathy takes you to higher places personally and professionally. We couldn't agree more. And
Yeah.
a lot of what we're sharing as well. I find this quite often when people are presenting ideas to a varied panel, or you have someone from the company speaking to the board, and usually the board has content experts and people completely from the outside that are not going to be knowing all the details, and that's important. If you are
Yeah.
joining us, hashtag stronger, because we're going to be giving away Weekend Language, one of the books that Dave has brilliantly written. I see another question, but Dave, anything else on virtual?
I think virtual it just takes a little bit of prep, a little bit of setup, and a lot of paranoia. Assume
Yeah.
that everything is going to go wrong, and believe me,
Yeah.
I've had it all. I've had cameras stop working, microphones that wouldn't pick up, all of that stuff. A little bit of preparation goes a long way,
Right.
even
Right.
to the extent sometimes you'll get the opportunity to have a rehearsal of some sort. Always take that opportunity.
Yes.
If
Yes.
you're speaking and they offer you a tech rehearsal or a tech check, do it. Do not assume that it's going to work on the day.
Right. Right. Dave, I want to also jump into one situation. We may not get to all of them, of distraction. We talked about audiences being distracted by their phones. In fact, in the newsletter, I wrote a real true story where we were presenting to a company, the finance division of a company, their stock, someone literally pushed the wrong button and came out with different calculations. They didn't catch it. Their stock dropped. And that morning, the phones started blowing up to the point where we were thinking, is there something that we said we couldn't figure out? Brenda and I my colleague, were doing the training session. People get distracted constantly, understandably at times, as a habit in others. And they also can distract you by assuming they've heard that you're going to do questions, but they want to stop you with a question. How do you respond with that? How can you prepare? And what does that say about you a little bit when you're on the spot?
Yeah, it's a good point. It happens all the time. Sometimes companies, a lot of companies will say, hey, I want to see your deck ahead of time. So they'll
Ahead of
send the slide deck. And that means that, does the executive look at it or do they not? And what's going to happen when you get in the room? It's very angst inducing for the speaker. And one of the things in terms of preparation is to come in with your major message, but also come in with answers to the 5 toughest questions that you're
Right.
going to get.
Right.
So the rude questions. If you think, oh, it's going to be about budget, then you can acknowledge the budget question. Yes, it is a big budget ask, but the reality is if we don't do it, our competitor will, and here's why. So you're very smooth with that, even though that's very uncomfortable. And there was a company I worked with where they insisted on sending the slides ahead of time. But what would happen is the CEO and the president would flip to slide 17 and say, $20 million? What are you talking about? Get that out of here. And it would throw the speakers quite often. So what we coach them to do would be to come in with your major message, but also be fluid enough with it to be able to answer those 5 or 6 or 7 nasty questions and then pivot back to the message. And that's part of the prep, but it's very uncomfortable. And frankly, what the questions, where the bodies are buried, where the landmines are. You got to prepare for that as well. It's part of it.
I tell a lot of times for speakers to prepare for that, and then in the slide, hide the Easter egg where you can click and then it goes to where the calculation was done. And usually audiences don't prepare. They don't expect speakers to be as well prepared. They expect them to go to the PowerPoint, to open all the slides, to search for that, to say, I have the calculations, or here's where this came from. But if you are preparing ahead, and in fact, I shared, I think, this in the newsletter and in the course, you can create your deck, or you can have your flow. You can use AI to say, I'm preparing to do this presentation. I want you to pretend you are the pickiest audience member that is going to throw me the spikiest questions that are there. And you ask AI to give you the 5 or 10 questions you can prepare for. It's really good. And Dave, I've tried it, and I've tried it with students as well, that it really gets you to think of things you would not have thought of, because you're in your, your channel, you're in your zone, and you're not thinking of who is going to be outside of the box asking you those questions.
Yeah. The other thing that sometimes if it's a senior executive, they tend to be very busy, so they ask very short, brutal questions.
Right.
You'll pitch for some money or whatever, and they'll say, that's too much.
Right.
And
it
what happens then?
influences
What do you
everyone
do?
else in the room. Yeah.
Right.
Mhm.
Right. So you
Yeah.
got to be prepared for the short rifle shot, as well as the meandering, well, from a strategic standpoint, blah, blah. And it's not really a question. It's a short soliloquy. And what that means is you can sit there and you're sort of preparing and you're thinking of your answer, and then you take a sip.
Right. I love
And then
it.
you keep going. It's to stay. Now, externally, you're like, okay, I'm prepared. But internally, you're like, oh God, oh God, oh God. And everyone has that internal, external thing going on like that. It's part of it. It's a very uncomfortable part of it, but it's part of the prep. You got to prep for the rude questions always.
So as we're coming to a close, because we want to be cognizant of your time, and before I ask Dave for his closing, what's the one thing they should remember? If you do #stronger and we do a raffle in just a little bit, we'll be able to send you one of these to your address that we'll email you and ask for. So Dave, as we close our show today in communicating and thriving in these high stake situations, what would you say is the one thing, if you didn't hear anything else, is the one thing you want to remember?
I would say for all of these, voluntold, shaking up the agenda, etc., think of what is the big thing. What's the suffix to the prefix being, if you remember nothing else today, remember this. When you can answer that part, then you're ready. And this can really help. I know probably 90% of you won't do it, but if you record yourself before your next presentation and watch it, you will be better than 95% of the other speakers that deliver that message.
Who think that they can wing it and still do a good job. Shelby, let's flip over to our raffle and see who is going to win the takeaway, the giveaway today, Weekend Language. I love the stripping away all of the terms that are complicated. And we have Shelby, you can't be the winner. Yes, Guilherme, wonderful. Thank you. Guilherme will reach out and ask for your mailing address and send that to you. For all of you that took the time to spend your afternoon, evening, morning with us, we want to say a big thank you. We really value that you think this learning is important. We wish you the best. This is going to stay as a recording. If you think someone else needs to see it that will benefit from it, please send it over. And Dave, thank you so much for your time. Always fun spending our time on the lives with you.
All right. Great to see everyone.
Take care, everyone.